Okay, so we're ready to start. So hello, Hannah. How are you?
Hey, Ali, I'm good. How are you?
So today we have Hannah with us. She's head of partnerships at the Data Appeal company. She's our guest today, and she will be talking a lot about the Data Appeal company data. I'll briefly introduce myself. My name is Alejandra, and I'm data partnerships lead at CARTO. We are in charge of data partnerships with data providers to be able to resell data through the CARTO platform. And Hannah here is with me. She will introduce herself.
Hey, everyone. I'm Hannah Babineau. I lead partnerships at Data Appeal. Really excited to be here. We've been longtime partners with CARTO, I think, for the last 4 or 5 years. So always exciting to join Ali and talk to you guys about the things that you can do with this sort of data and maybe opportunities that you haven't thought about before.
Thank you, Hannah. I think we can start.
Sounds good. Hi, everyone. Hopefully you're having a good morning, afternoon, depending where in the world you're calling from. Today, we're going to talk about the importance of enriching POI data or points of interest with sentiment indicators for really effective and sustainable market expansion, especially within the retail and consumer goods industries. Before I get started, though, I really wanted to ask for your participation, everyone. And if you could let me know who has read a review in the last year, 12 months before maybe booking a hotel, going to a restaurant, maybe making a purchase online, maybe choosing your travel destination. You should have a poll in front of you. I'll put yes. All right. Wow. Okay. So all of us have referred to online reviews, which is great. That's the answer we were hoping for. So what we're seeing with statistics is 95% of us are referring to and reading online reviews before making any purchase or decision. On the flip side, who has written a review or published a rating before, after their experience going to a hotel, a restaurant, etc. Okay. Makes sense. A little bit less, about a little over half of us are publishing our experiences online, which is quite on par with what we're seeing statistics. Almost 3 out of 4 of us are publishing kind of our opinions online and sharing kind of how our experience went. So what does this mean really in a context when we're looking at this globally? Well, when you can see that 82% of us are actually trusting kind of the voice of customers and each other instead of the messages from that brand, obviously there's something there and there's something behind that. So we as kind of Data Appeal really wanted to set out to say, okay, what does this mean when you're looking globally? And what we found is every single minute, there's over 5 million pieces of feedback being left behind by people like you and me kind of experiencing the world, whether it is going to a hotel, going out to eat at a restaurant, but even things like using EV chargers or an ATM machine. So kind of this idea of the feedback economy is everywhere. And in fact, 90%, 94% of us are going out of our way to avoid a business based on negative feedback, complaints online. So we're putting our faith into complete strangers and really forming our choices and formulating our decisions based on this information. So we thought, why are we as consumers so reliant? But businesses are still really relying on traditional metrics, maybe like surveys and things that are a little bit more subjective when they're really kind of could be leveraging this feedback economy and the importance of reviews at kind of a global level or a more location intelligence sort of view. So that's kind of how we were founded in a nutshell. Really quickly, just to kind of go over the types of data that we provide. You can think of them in 4 different layers. Kind of the first for us is the base is what's happening on the ground. So location data, points of interest data, POI, it's called different things, but essentially it's understanding what's physically located in a territory. And it could be anything from a hotel to a restaurant to a gas station, but even things like bus stops or public parks or even airline terminals within an airport. So essentially anything with a physical presence. And we enrich that data with, of course, these rich attributes, things like opening hours, contact information, maybe the website, the phone number. And then what we really found to be kind of this key element is the second layer that we call sentiment. And essentially what that is it measures the degree of customer satisfaction coming from online reviews. We semantically analyze online content from about 200 different channels, anything from Google to TripAdvisor to Yelp, Foursquare, etc., and really understand in natural language what people are saying and what their experience is. And this can be as granular or holistic as possible. So maybe if it is a cafe, what do people think about the coffee? What do people think maybe about the Wi-Fi? But then on the flip side, maybe how does your cafe compare against the one across the street or year after year in time? We also look at the popularity or the demand of these places. So how many reviews are they receiving? Because we know maybe one place with one review that's amazing from, the guy's best friend doesn't tell the full story. So for us, it's important to understand what is the sentiment and how does that compare against also the number of reviews and the popularity of these places. Third, we always say no POI or no point of interest is an island, because essentially it's what's happening in a territory impacts these businesses. So we also look at things like hotel prices, flight bookings, arrivals, events, and spending to really understand the dynamics of a territory. And lastly, over the last few months, we've really been kind of working on creating these unique KPIs that are tailored to specific things, like what's the perception of a specific business for matters like sustainability or LGBTQ plus inclusivity, to understand exactly kind of how these businesses are performing, not only in terms of the experience of the service itself, but in terms of kind of some of these wider issues that we're facing.
Hannah, I have this question. Do you have an idea of the type of people that include their reviews online? Like, I guess the younger people are more willing to give their opinion and share their reviews online instead of, I don't know, people with more than 50 years old or so. Do you have an idea of what like the kind of target audience is?
There's really kind of no major trend. What we've found is really it's between the age of 16 to about 75, 80. A lot of people are kind of leaving their feedback. And I think that's kind of the beauty of these different channels, because some channels have made it really easy that you don't even have to leave a review. You can just leave a rating. So for us, that's also an added insight. But a lot of people, especially within like the hospitality, food and beverage, retail industries, a lot of companies understand the importance of the reviews. So, when you're going to a hotel, you get the email, thanks for staying with us, can you leave a review? So you're being directed even on applications, like if you make a hotel booking or a restaurant on Foursquare or the Fork, they're asking, how was your experience? So really they're making it, I think, as friendly as possible. Of course, it is geared towards those who are more digital focused. So who might have a smartphone, who might have access to a computer. But again, age isn't really impacting kind of this sort of customer.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I just wanted to show here, it's a really quick kind of screencast of kind of how that data comes to life. Ale, kind of in the second half of the presentation, will show us a real example. Just wanted to kind of, I think it always helps to have the visualization behind it, understand, okay, what does this actually mean when you're looking at a territory? And one thing that's really unique about this data is when you aggregate it, you can also get an understanding of what's happening in a destination or in a territory. So of course, it's important to understand what's the sentiment of these different businesses or maybe the overall industry. But when you aggregate all those points of interest in a specific neighborhood, is it perceived maybe safe? Is this an area that might be a little bit more affordable or cost effective? So you can really kind of play with the layering of this data. Kind of going into the use cases, I want to say they're limitless, because I think as Ali and I see that we're finding new use cases and ways to kind of implement this data. These are typically the 5 that we see the most. The first and kind of most obvious is, of course, market evaluation and expansion. So if you're a business or a brand wanting to go into, a new market, understanding, okay, what's actually physically there? Does it make sense for me to expand? And then you can really get into kind of the nitty gritty, you could say, of what this means for each of them. Of course, a big one is site selection. I think we saw, especially with the pandemic, businesses are being a lot more strategic about where they're either opening or closing a brick and mortar store. Another one that we've seen is distributors. So if you are, again, like a consumer good or a retail brand, where are you kind of selling your products to? Who's kind of this intermediary? And we have a really cool example for that I'll show in a few slides. Also things like outdoor advertising. If you're putting a digital ad or a billboard, does it make sense? Maybe if you're putting an ad for sneakers, are there gyms, are there retail stores that sell athletic apparel in this area? Because of course, it's one thing, are there a lot of people that we can see with mobility data? Definitely, of course, that's really important, but take that to the next level. Are there kind of shops that people can go to, keep things kind of first in mind? And then lastly, kind of going back to your question, Ali, on the consumer side, because with the sentiment data, you can also break it down. So who is saying these things? Is it a more local area? Is it more tourists? Maybe specific tourists from different kind of countries prefer these areas. So maybe especially within like the hospitality or food and beverage industry, you want to cater to a specific kind of target market. So kind of going through them one by one with the market expansion, really understanding, okay, what's actually physically there. Are there points of interest that are either competitors to your business or kind of complementary? We've seen that a lot with a lot of kind of EV chargers, especially. I think that's a really hot topic over the last few years.
Definitely.
So, you know, are there maybe cafes nearby where people can kind of charge while they're kind of going to a cafe, or maybe universities, co-working spaces? I know where we're based right now in Florence, we have a huge co-working spaces, and over the last 6 months, we've seen like 3 new EV chargers come in, since it is a popular place that people do commute by car. And I'm also understanding how that changes over time, because the beauty of the historic data is you can see, was it just a trend, kind of a glitch because of the pandemic, or were things actually this way before 2020 as well?
Hey,
Maybe.
Hannah, do you think the EV charging spots is a trend at the moment, and it's going to be like, it's going to last for a long time, since it's something that's booming at the moment?
I definitely think so, because I think we're only kind of at the tip of the iceberg, because there's still so many traditional cars out there, if you could say. So definitely, I think EV chargers, and I think gas stations are also implementing, kind of adding more EV chargers to them as well. So it's definitely something I think, especially when people do more like long haul driving. Since right now we're typically seeing them in cities, but not many, of course, on highways. So I think that we'll see the push for like the more long term.
Maybe it will be interesting in the near future to make an analysis of how it grew in terms of numbers, right? Just see a few years back and then a few years forward, and just have a look at the numbers and just see how it grew, because I think it's going to be like exponential, right?
Definitely. And I think we're seeing probably the trend starting in the north of Europe, working its way into the south. I think we saw a huge boom with the Nordics, the Netherlands, and now we're both located in the Mediterranean. So I think now we're starting to feel it a bit more.
Yeah, it's an interesting analysis. We'll keep that in mind for future webinars.
Exactly. I really wanted to share, this is a cool use case of Campari that I presented kind of at your conference a few weeks back. And essentially they leverage this data and the CARTO interface to really understand, they wanted to expand the Aperol product. If you guys are familiar with the Aperol spritz. So what are the cafes, the bars, the restaurants, essentially kind of that nightlife? What are these areas that make sense to expand? And one example that it's really funny is, of course, you can't say, okay, all bars, that's your target. Because of course, think about like an English pub, for example, it's a place that everyone's ordering beer on tap. The last thing people would want is a spritz. And that's kind of the nature of this POI data. So having this added value of enrichment is really insightful to say, okay, is my target market going here? Maybe is it the type of atmosphere for my target market? Also, especially companies, we're seeing a huge increase in the Middle East. So do these places even serve alcohol? So kind of just getting over that barrier is something that we're finding is really important for especially companies who want to expand into Dubai, Abu Dhabi, kind of that market.
We saw this huge hype in Spain for Aperol spritz, like a few years before the pandemic. Like 10 years ago, I didn't even know what it was. But then suddenly 6 years ago, it was everywhere and everybody was drinking that. And I think it's having like it's settling in Spain, but still it's a bit of a trend at the moment. It's now I think almost everybody knows what it is, but there were a few years back where everybody was like, wow, what is the drink? But in Italy, it was really something very normal, and it had been that way for a long time, right?
Yeah, I think the brand is Campari, so I think they've always known that it's something that's been ingrained into the culture here, is this kind of aperitivo or happy hour kind of atmosphere. So I think they found, as other countries are starting to adapt this, how can we kind of find that spritz experience essentially to market this product based on, and I think they hit the nail on the head. They knew exactly who their target market was. And for them, it was understanding how can we expand this effectively, but also sustainably, to understand, okay, we don't want to throw the net that wide. We only want to throw the net that, in places that make sense to us.
Yeah, that's very wise.
This is kind of that same use case. So really kind of drilling down to understand, okay, for each of these points of interest, of course, Campari, we saw, I think there was maybe 60,000 restaurants in just the city of Istanbul. Of course, they don't have hundreds and hundreds of people that can call each restaurant and sell the products. So for them, it was really kind of using the sentiment to find the best of the best, if you will. So which places have a lot of reviews and a lot of positive reviews. So leveraging both that popularity and the sentiment aspect to really kind of fine tune it to the top 10, 15% of places that they wanted to focus their sales effort. I mentioned it at the beginning, but also like outdoor advertising and pop-up events. Again, for Campari, that was something that was really interesting for them, is kind of the spritz experience. Sometimes you might see like the umbrellas that have the Aperol logo and these pop-up events. And for them, again, using this kind of the sentiment on the location level, help them understand, okay, which areas are most popular in that happy hour time. So really kind of focusing this index between, the hours of 5 and 8 p.m. Because, spritz isn't something that it's not kind of a nightclub sort of drink. And they found that people don't usually order it at 2 a.m. But it's also not kind of the drink that people have at lunch. So for them, they really wanted to focus it down on this happy hour or aperitivo time. And then kind of lastly, understanding who these people are. They knew that they have specific markets, especially the Mediterranean, especially the US consumers are really interested. So with the sentiment, they were also able to kind of filter it down. So which areas are more popular in the eyes maybe of the US market in Istanbul, or Italians going to Istanbul? Are there specific neighborhoods that they tend to gather around? So really interesting information. I'll pass it back over to Ali to kind of go through kind of the behind the scenes.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Can you all see my screen?
I can.
Okay, so I'm gonna share a demo of the Data Appeal Company data. So you're gonna see the data in action. So our example use case, we are a coffee supplier company looking to expand to new merchants in Rome. What we know, our ingredients, we know which locations are currently supplying and our annual revenue from their orders. So we know which which locations, which bars or cafes are the most successful, so to speak. And we have that from the company, but then from Data Appeal company, we also know locations of all food and beverage suppliers in Rome. So we have all the potential new suppliers with the Data Appeal company data. And we also have the footfall and the sentiment scores for each of these. So we have all the ingredients we need to create this amazing analysis. So this will be the decision-making process. So number one, we will create and enrich a grid. Number two, we will create a tween areas analysis. And then number three, we will select the top locations. Okay. So first, we will create and enrich the grid with a new feature from CARTO. So using CARTO workflows, a low-code visual analytics tool for multi-step and iterative analysis. So it's really a tool that is super useful for people that are not so familiar with coding, that don't have enough coding skills to create SQL analysis. So the key steps is to create an H3 from GeoPoint that creates H3 grid cells and at each input point. So H3 is a grid of hexagons. So that will be the starting point. And then we will use the function group by that calculates average values in each cell in case of if there are duplicates. Okay, so it creates a average value. So with that average, we will choose the best locations. You will see this in the demo in the tool in a minute. Then number two, we will create a tween area analysis. So we will create a user-defined function from CARTO's analytics toolbox. You will be able to use some of the CARTO functions apart from the platform and the data, which uses principal component analysis to score the input grid based on how similar cells are to the input. So you will be able to define some standards and find where are the locations that meet those standards, so that will be as popular as the ones that you already have. So the key steps, the input is the top 48 or 5% locations based on annual revenue. So the places that sell the most. Also, input variables are average sentiment and footfall. So the output will be a score based on how similar the location is in terms of sentiment and footfall to the top current 5% locations. After that, we will create a spatial join to see what are the selected top locations. So this is the process, like the theory. We will go now see how this is done. So I am going to share the demo. So here it is. This is the tool. So it's CARTO Builder. So first of all, I'm going to share the first layer. As I mentioned before, we have created a grid. So it is, as you can see, they're hexagons here in Rome. So this is the sentiment average score. So the more yellow the hexagon is, the higher average sentiment score.
I think, Ali,
yes.
Click on the link. We're not seeing your screen.
Oh, really?
We're seeing the questions.
Which questions?
The platform from the
Okay.
presentation.
Let me. Okay, yes. Now, 1 second. Can you see the demo now?
Yes.
Perfect. So as I was mentioning, so number one, first step was to create the grid. So as you can see here, you should be seeing hexagons the shape of an hexagon in Rome. So the more yellow the hexagon is, the higher the average sentiment score. So top locations will be more in the yellow areas. Okay. Second of all, I'm going to hide layers and then we will see all of them together. Second of all, second step, we have created tween areas. So we have decided a few inputs that are the things that we think are top to select a new location. So in this case, the color red are the most similar distributors. So in this case, you will see the scale goes from 0.8 to 0.98 of similarity. Then number 3, we can see here with the join that yellow spots have been created. So the bigger the spot is, the more similar to the different points that we have decided that are important for us are. So the bigger the spot and the more yellow, the better the location is in terms of similarity. So also you will be able to see here the existing merchants. So the bigger the dot as well, the more revenue it's bringing. And last but not least, these are the potential locations. So all the data is here, but what we want, really the decision will be based in that number 3, select top locations. So we will be basing our decision on this specific layer, where the join between the locations that are already selling our product and the ones that are not, but that they have similar characteristics than the ones that are already our clients. So this is it. I'm going to go back to the presentation. And we are ready for questions. Can you see the question slide, Hannah?
I can.
Great.
You're good.
So I'm going to go to the Q&A. So we have a few questions. So how can you make sure the sentiment is accurate?
It's definitely a great question. We talked a little bit about it before, but essentially kind of what we do is analyze about 200 different sources. So different review channels, social media that are geospatially linked to these points of interest themselves. So for us, it's important to understand, okay, what's the sentiment of this point of interest and not the overall, maybe the brand monitoring or the general social feeling. And we use NLP, so natural language processing. So we do the semantic analysis based on the language that it's written in. So of course it is an engine, it learns as it improves, but it definitely picks up things like humor or sarcasm. So it's quite strong, and the more it ingests data, the more it learns. So that's really kind of how we found.
Because tone is so important when leaving a review as well. So that's interesting. Next question. Can sentiment data be used for customer segmentation?
Definitely, yeah. So as I mentioned before, with the sentiment, you can also break it down by the country of origin or the language. Again, both are quite important. We actually had a use case earlier today in the office that for them, they wanted to understand Swiss speaking German. So we're able to segment it down by the Swiss market. So reviews and online content that comes from profiles coming from Switzerland, and then even further break it down to German speaking, because of course with bilingual, trilingual countries, it's important to also distinguish. Maybe they have different opinions, different cultures. So for them, it was to kind of get down to that specific level.
So you gather also data in different languages?
We do, yeah. All
That's
languages.
amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, because for some local brands, that'll be super interesting and definitely worth analyzing, because one thing is like tourists and people that visit from other countries, but of course, local people are also very important.
Definitely.
Okay, we have another question. What are the top industries using this data?
I mean, as I mentioned before, it's really limitless. I mean, we even have use cases with finance and tourism, but typically we're seeing a lot of retail, consumer goods, real estate. So on the investment side, those are kind of the main three.
Okay. So there's a question here for the demo. So for me, and what are you basing the potential locations? We are basing it on the sentiment and the footfall. We know the sentiment from the current places that are selling our coffee. Like, remember, we were a coffee company, so we already know the average score of the sentiment. We already know the average footfall of the locations. So the tween areas would be the most similar in terms of sentiment and in terms of footfall. So the most similar in terms of how positive the sentiment is, and the most similar to how many people go to that place as an average, daily or weekly or monthly, whatever we decide. We have another question. So hello, thanks for sharing this information. I have a question. The information have coverage in Latin America? So yeah, right, Hannah, you're a global company, right?
Completely global. In total, it's about 250 million POIs worldwide, and constantly adding them as places open.
Good. Another question, how can you manage that the top points are also in a space with competitors if you are using the information of the current customers? Well, in the demo, we have used the current customers to define what the threshold is as a successful location. But then we have used data appeal data, which are competitors and other POIs, to see the potential suppliers for the coffee. So we have used both. We have used the company's data in terms of revenue and in terms of what sentiment and what footfall is happening in the locations. But then we have also used POI data from the places that we are not selling the coffee yet. So we have used both for the demo. I think we have time for two more questions. One is, which markets do you currently cover, and if this sentiment data can be matched with clients' customer database to make some conclusions? So I think that question was answered with our answers from the previous ones. So it's a global data. You can get data from any market in the world. And of course, yes, it can be matched with clients' customers database to make conclusions and decision-making. And last question, can we look at the brand buyers to a specific store, or is it only at a postcode level?
So unfortunately, we don't have any information on the buyer specifically. So who they are, kind of the level that we get on the consumer is the country of origin, the language that they're speaking, and then like attributes about them, if they're like a family, a couple, a business traveler, that sort of thing. But definitely, I know CARTO has kind of hundreds and hundreds of different data sources. So of course, the more specific you get, the less global I think providers are. So every country kind of has their own take on like consumer data. We're based in Europe, so with GDPR, kind of getting down to that specific consumer level is a bit tricky, but typically the brand itself will have that information. So it's how can we kind of match it, or we essentially call it data enrichment. So how can we essentially put it together and show a bigger story?
Mm-hmm. And we have one last question. Do you have information about food retailers like supermarkets and hypermarkets? You do.
Yeah, we do. I think it's, what is it, 800 or 900 different categories? It's a lot.
Yeah, we are working with this client that requires data from supermarkets, hypermarkets, and this type of big stores. And they're producing an analysis with CARTO and the data pill company data, right?
Yeah.
Well, this was it. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending, for your questions. Please feel free to reach out if you have any further questions. We will be happy to reply by email and hopefully see you very soon in a new webinar. Thank you, Hannah.
Thank you, Ali, and thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.